Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It's funny how the most ordinary day can turn into one you'll remember for the rest of your life. I didn't expect anything unusual that evening. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice the ticking of the clock on the wall and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My son had gone out with some of his friends, but one of them stayed behind. I wasn't sure why at first, but I didn't mind. He was polite, respectful, and I had always liked the way he carried himself, not with arrogance like some young men, but with a calmness that felt reassuring. That we found ourselves sitting in the living room, the curtains half drawn against the fading light. The air outside was warm, but inside it was cool and comfortable. I offered him something to drink, just lemonade I had made earlier, and we sat for a while making small talk. At first it was about the usual things, simple conversations about work, about the neighborhood, even about the way the weather had been acting unpredictable lately. But there was something in the way he listened that kept me talking. His eyes didn't wander to his phone, and he didn't rush to fill the silences. It was as though he understood that sometimes the pauses are just as important as the words. Hours stretched longer than I realized. I had cooked earlier in the day, and I offered him a plate. He thanked me as if I'd done something extraordinary, even though it was just leftover pasta. I couldn't help but smile at that, how someone younger could appreciate such a small, everyday gesture. It reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time, being seen for the little things, the things that often go unnoticed in the busyness of family life. After dinner, he asked if we could watch a movie. I hesitated for a moment, not because I didn't want to, but because I realized how long it had been since I had sat down just to enjoy something so simple. Usually, the television was background noise, news, shows I didn't care about, something to fill the silence when no one was home. But this time it felt different. I agreed, and we chose something familiar, a film I had seen years ago. He had never watched it before, which made me pay attention in a new way. The living room grew darker as the evening deepened, the only light coming from the flickering screen. The soundtrack filled the space, but underneath it was a quiet awareness that we were sharing more than just a film. There was a closeness in the air, not rushed, not forced, but steady. He leaned back into the couch, relaxed, and I found myself doing the same. Our laughter at certain scenes overlapped, and when the story slowed into its tender moments, there was silence between us that carried its own weight. That I found myself remembering what it was like to feel connected to someone, not through obligation, not through routine, but through genuine presence. It wasn't about age or roles, it was about two people finding comfort in the same space, in the same moment. He asked me questions here and there, not just about the movie, but about my life, and I realized how rare it was for someone to truly want to know. I spoke carefully, testing the waters of honesty, and he listened without judgment, without interruption. The night stretched on, and I realized hours had passed without either of us noticing. My son still hadn't come home, and the thought crossed my mind that perhaps this quiet, unexpected evening was meant just for the two of us. There was no rush to make it more than it was, no need to define it. It was simply two people sharing time, and in that simplicity, I felt something awaken in me. Not a longing, not something reckless, but a recognition of the value of being understood. By the time the movie ended, the house felt different. It wasn't louder or brighter, but it was alive with the warmth of the experience we had shared. He smiled at me, a smile that carried gratitude, and I knew that something important had happened, not dramatic, not loud, but important nonetheless. That night, when I finally went to bed, I lay awake longer than I expected, staring at the ceiling and replaying the hours we had spent together. It wasn't about the film, or even the conversations. It was about the feeling of being present, of being noticed, and of realizing that even in unexpected company, you can discover pieces of yourself you thought you had lost. And so, what began as an ordinary evening turned into the beginning of a memory I knew would stay with me, quiet, gentle, but unforgettable. The morning light filtered softly through the blinds, casting long, gentle stripes across the living room where I had fallen asleep on the couch. I woke to the sound of birds outside and a quiet shuffle of feet, the kind of subtle noise that makes you aware someone is nearby without demanding attention. He was already up, tidying the dishes from last night and quietly moving around the kitchen as if he didn't want to disturb the fragile peace that had settled between us. There was something about the way he handled the morning, the calm efficiency, that made me notice things I had long ignored in myself. The way he wiped the counter, the way he smiled when he found a small crumb on the floor, even the small, almost unconscious tilt of his head as he hummed a tune I didn't recognize, all of it added to a sense of being quietly seen. I watched him for a moment, feeling a strange warmth at this simple observation. We had breakfast together, a casual affair of toast, fruit, and coffee, though I was surprised at how much the ritual itself felt intimate. We shared stories of our childhoods, our workdays, even small anecdotes about neighbors I had long since stopped noticing. He asked questions that were thoughtful, without probing too deeply, and I realized I could answer honestly without fear of judgment. The conversations were effortless, and in that effortless rhythm, I felt a connection I hadn't expected. After breakfast, we decided to spend the day quietly. There was no grand plan, only the sense that the hours were ours to fill, and the freedom to let them unfold naturally. We wandered through my small garden, commenting on the blooms and the subtle changes the seasons had brought. He noticed details I had overlooked, the way the sunlight hit a patch of lavender, the tiny insects that danced among the leaves, even the slightly crooked branch of an old rose bush that I had long thought was ruined. His attention made me see my surroundings in a new light, and I felt grateful for it. Later, we returned to the living room and settled down with a book each. The house was quiet except for the occasional turning of a page and the muted hum of the air conditioning. I glanced at him from time to time, noticing the slight furrow in his brow as he read, the gentle tilt of his shoulders, and I felt a curious mixture of admiration and comfort. There was no rush, no need to fill the silences with words, and yet the shared presence was like a language of its own, unspoken but deeply understood. By mid-afternoon, the conversation turned toward memories, childhood summers, family traditions, old friendships. He shared stories from his own youth, and I felt a surprising kinship forming. There was laughter, yes, but also moments of quiet reflection that made me realize how rare it is to meet someone who listens as much as they speak. And in those moments, I felt a gentle shift within myself, as though the layers of routine and responsibility had softened just enough to allow this unexpected companionship to flourish. When it was time to watch another movie, the choice was spontaneous. We picked a classic I had adored in my younger years, one that had always made me laugh and occasionally shed a tear. As the opening scenes played, I noticed how attentive he was, how he reacted to the story with genuine emotion. We laughed together at the comedic moments and sighed at the poignant ones, and I realized that this simple act, sharing a story through film, had become a conduit for our own unspoken understanding. The light in the room shifted as the afternoon waned into evening, and I felt a peculiar sense of timelessness. The hours seemed to stretch and fold in on themselves, each moment layering on the next, creating a tapestry of memory I knew I would revisit often. The way he responded to me, thoughtful, patient, and respectful, made me reflect on my own life, on the connections I had overlooked or taken for granted. By the time the movie ended, the room was bathed in the soft glow of the evening light. We sat for a few moments in silence, savoring the conclusion not just of the film, but of the shared experience itself. There was a feeling of quiet completion, a sense that the day had given us both something unexpectedly precious. When he finally prepared to leave, I felt a pang of reluctant gratitude, the kind that comes when something meaningful is about to shift. We exchanged a simple, heartfelt farewell, and I watched him walk toward the door, carrying with him the warmth and quiet strength that had quietly transformed the hours we spent together. As I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, I realized that these hours had left me changed, not dramatically, not suddenly, but subtly, in the way that matters most. There was a clarity, a gentle awareness of the beauty of being present, of truly sharing space and time with someone who sees you. And I knew that even as life returned to its usual rhythms, this memory, this connection, would stay with me, quietly shaping how I noticed the world and the people within it. The day had begun like any other, but it ended as something extraordinary in its simplicity, a reminder that unexpected companionship can awaken parts of ourselves we thought were long dormant, and that sometimes the most profound experiences come not from grand gestures, but from shared presence and mutual respect. The next morning, the house felt lighter somehow, as though the hours we had shared had left a quiet trace in the air. I moved around the kitchen preparing breakfast, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself humming without realizing it. When he came down, he had that easy, unhurried way of moving that always seemed to fill a room with calm. It was remarkable how a person's presence alone could reshape the atmosphere. We ate together in a companionable silence for a few moments before the conversation naturally resumed. This time, it drifted toward hopes, small dreams, and reflections that rarely surface in day-to-day chatter. He spoke of ambitions, the little goals he had for the year, and the unexpected detours that life had thrown his way. I listened, fascinated, not just by the stories themselves, but by the way he framed them, with honesty, with a sense of quiet resilience. I felt an urge to share more than usual, to speak about my own small victories, regrets, and the things I sometimes tucked away in the corners of my mind. After breakfast, we went out for a short walk, just around the neighborhood. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. We moved slowly, noticing the familiar streets in ways I hadn't before. He pointed out things I had never thought about: the curve of a sidewalk, the way sunlight painted patterns on the brick walls, even the distant sound of children playing in a park. Each observation felt like a gentle invitation to see the world through a new lens. As we walked, our conversation deepened. We spoke about family, about moments that shaped us, about choices we sometimes regretted and the lessons we had taken from them. There was a rare kind of vulnerability in the way we exchanged these thoughts, not desperate or seeking approval, but simply offering pieces of ourselves for recognition. I felt a profound gratitude for this, a sense of connection that transcended ordinary friendship or casual acquaintance. It was as if time itself had paused just for this dialogue. Returning home, we decided to prepare lunch together. It wasn't about the meal, really, but the act of working side by side, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and sharing laughs over kitchen mishaps. There was a rhythm to it, a silent understanding that made the experience feel effortless. He listened when I shared anecdotes from my younger days, and I could tell he genuinely enjoyed the stories. The kind of attention he offered was rare, patient, fully present, and devoid of pretense. After lunch, the idea of watching another movie arose naturally. This time, it was one I hadn't seen in decades, a film that had once brought me comfort during difficult times. As the opening credits rolled, I felt a rush of nostalgia mixed with a sense of anticipation, wondering how he would respond. He leaned back, attentive, and I found myself narrating certain scenes quietly, sharing memories they evoked. It became less about the movie and more about the dialogue it inspired between us, a shared space where reflection and storytelling intertwined. Hours passed, and the sunlight outside shifted toward the warm, golden hue of evening. I caught myself glancing at him more often than usual, noticing the small gestures, the expressions that revealed thoughtfulness and care. He laughed easily at the right moments, his reactions genuine, and it made the movie, already rich in memory and sentiment, feel even more alive. We paused occasionally just to discuss a scene or an idea, and in those pauses, I sensed an unspoken trust forming between us, a mutual acknowledgement that these hours were special. As night approached, I felt a sense of introspection settle over me. The quiet hum of the house, the soft fading light, and the warmth of shared laughter created a delicate balance between joy and reflection. It was extraordinary how someone could enter your life for a brief span and leave such an imprint, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through presence, attentiveness, and simple, meaningful connection. When it was finally time for him to leave, I walked him to the door. There was no awkwardness, no pressure to define what had happened, just a sincere sense of gratitude. He smiled, and in that moment, I realized how rare it is to encounter someone whose presence leaves you feeling lighter, more aware, and quietly enriched. Closing the door, I lingered for a moment, absorbing the echoes of the day, the laughter, the conversations, and the unexpected depth of a companionship that had emerged from ordinary hours. I sat back in the living room, reflecting on the day. There was a clarity, a newfound appreciation for the small yet profound experiences that life can offer. And I knew that while life would resume its normal rhythm tomorrow, these hours, quiet, unassuming, and emotionally rich, would remain with me, a cherished memory of unexpected connection and the gentle awakening of my own heart. The following morning arrived with a softness I hadn't anticipated. The sunlight spilled through the windows in a warm, gentle cascade, illuminating the living room where I had spent the night reflecting. The quiet was comforting, but it also carried a weight, the awareness that the days we had shared were unique and that today, eventually, we would return to our usual routines. Yet, rather than a sense of loss, there was a peaceful anticipation, a desire to savor these final hours before they became a memory etched in time. He arrived shortly after breakfast, carrying a small loaf of bread he had picked up on the way, as if even this gesture were meant to honor the moments we had shared. We sat together, laughing over trivial things, comparing our taste in food, and sharing thoughts on books we had read and films we had loved. The ease between us was profound, a quiet understanding that had grown naturally over the previous days. There was no rush, no expectation, simply the pleasure of companionship in its most honest form. After our morning conversation, we decided to take a walk in a nearby park. The air was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of early autumn leaves and the earthy smell of freshly fallen dew. He pointed out things I had missed before, the way sunlight glinted on a puddle, the subtle patterns of shadows cast by the trees, the distant laughter of children that somehow felt musical. Each observation drew me in, made me more present, and reminded me how much I had overlooked in my own surroundings. As we walked, the conversation deepened further. We spoke about our dreams, our fears, and the lessons life had imparted. He asked questions that encouraged reflection, not interrogation, and I realized how rare it is to meet someone who genuinely listens, who allows you to explore your thoughts without judgment or interruption. I shared memories I had tucked away, long-forgotten moments of joy and sorrow, and he responded with empathy and warmth, creating a space where vulnerability felt safe and valued. Returning home, we sat in the living room, letting the afternoon stretch out with quiet activities, reading, talking in soft tones, and occasionally sharing smiles over something humorous or poignant. There was a rhythm to it, a gentle ebb and flow that made time feel elastic, expanding in a way that let us savor each moment. The television remained off for most of the day, replaced by the natural soundtrack of our companionship, the shifting light, the distant sounds of the neighborhood, and the unspoken understanding between us. As evening approached, we decided to watch one final film together. It was a classic, one that had always reminded me of resilience and the quiet strength of ordinary people. He was attentive, but also reflective, and it felt as though we were not just watching the story unfold on the screen but also examining our own experiences alongside it. The shared laughter and soft sighs at the appropriate moments created a delicate intimacy that was entirely emotional, entirely human, and deeply grounding. When the movie ended, the room was filled with a comfortable silence. I realized that these hours, so ordinary on the surface, had become extraordinary through the depth of presence and connection we had cultivated. There was no dramatic climax, no life-altering event, just the profound simplicity of understanding, of being acknowledged and seen in ways that matter most. Finally, the time came for him to leave. I walked him to the door, and we exchanged a sincere farewell, one that carried gratitude, respect, and a quiet acknowledgement of what had passed between us. The warmth of his presence lingered even as the door closed, leaving me with a sense of peaceful reflection. I realized that what had made these days remarkable was not the events themselves but the emotional resonance, the subtle tension of shared awareness, and the gentle discovery of connection across generations. As I settled back into the quiet of the house, I reflected on what I had learned. Life often moves so fast, filled with obligations and routines that we barely notice the beauty around us. Yet, sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, we are given the gift of presence, a chance to connect, to see, and to feel deeply. These hours with him had reminded me of that gift, had shown me that emotional intimacy, mutual respect, and genuine attention are as vital as any major life event. And so, the memory of those days stayed with me, not as a fleeting novelty, but as a quiet revelation, that the most meaningful experiences are often those that arrive unexpectedly, that unfold gently, and that leave us feeling richer, more aware, and profoundly grateful for the simple, yet extraordinary connections we sometimes find in the people around us.